The Indiana Fever front office just got caught in a lie they've been telling for 2 weeks straight, and their own fans exposed it before the team ever did. Welcome back to WNBA Analysis. If you've been wondering why Damiris Dantis hasn't been on the court, why the Fever went silent, and why nobody in that front office wanted to answer a simple question, stick around because by the end of this video you'll understand exactly how deep this cover-up goes, and why it connects directly to a decision that's been haunting this franchise since free agency. This is bigger than one injury. This is about a pattern. And honestly, that's exactly why channels like this one exist. Because you deserve better than press releases dressed up as journalism. You deserve someone willing to actually ask the question nobody else in that press box is brave enough to ask. If this video helped you see what's really going on behind the curtain at Indiana, if you're tired of getting spoon-fed the company line instead of the truth, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely means more than you know. This channel only grows because people like you decide the Real story is worth sticking around for. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's keep holding this league accountable together. I'm not going anywhere, and neither should you. Nobody in that organization thought to ask the obvious question. Where has Dantis actually been? And when people finally started digging, the answer they got back wasn't an explanation. It was a request to stay quiet. Don't tell anybody. Keep it under wraps. But here's the silver lining the Fever wants you to focus on instead. Justine Pat is available so she can slide right into the lineup. Convenient timing, right? Watch that reaction from fans carefully, because what you're witnessing is a fan base realizing in real time that their front office has been lying to them for weeks. Damiris Dantis is out for the season. Torn meniscus. Surgery already completed. Season over. But here's the question nobody at the Fever wants to answer. When did this actually happen? Because it sure wasn't during a game. The Fever announced this injury like it was breaking news. Except fans have been asking where Dantis has been for 2 full weeks. Radio silence. No answers. No transparency. And now we find out she's been quietly rehabbing a torn meniscus this entire time, while the front office told reporters to keep their mouths shut. Sound familiar? It should. This is the same organization that hid Caitlin Clark's high ankle sprain last season until a reporter leaked it. The same organization that let a valuable young player walk in free agency while holding on to an injured veteran. And now the pattern is becoming impossible to ignore. Damiris Dantis has a torn meniscus in her left knee. She underwent surgery and will miss the remainder of the 2026 WNBA season. Let's hear what head coach Stephanie White had to say about it. When asked what the team would miss most, her first response wasn't about Dantis's shooting. It wasn't about her defense. It was, "We'll miss her in the locker room." Stop right there. Out of everything she could have said, that's what came first. And that's actually the most honest thing anyone in that organization has said in weeks, because that's exactly the justification they gave fans for letting Dani Henderson walk in the offseason while keeping Dantis. Culture. Leadership. Veteran presence. Intangibles that don't show up in a box score but supposedly matter for team chemistry. But here's what makes this fascinating. If Dantis is so essential to the locker room culture, if she's this irreplaceable veteran leader, why did the Fever hide her injury? Why the secrecy? Why not proudly announce her mentorship role the moment it happened? Because they knew exactly how bad it would look. They knew the second this came out, fans would ask the one question the front office has been dreading. Why did we let Dani Henderson leave? Not because of what Henderson gave them on the court, but because of intangibles, glue, culture, presence. That justification just went out the window. And Stephanie White still has to stand there and defend it. Then there's the floor spacing narrative. White tried to sell fans on missing Dantis's ability to stretch the floor. Have you actually watched Dantis play this season? Her three-point percentage has been declining for 2 consecutive years. She's been one of the least efficient shooters on the entire roster. The only thing she's been stretching lately is her pregame warm-up routine. This isn't analysis. This is damage control. White knows she has to justify keeping Dantis over Henderson, so she's constructing a narrative that doesn't match what's actually on tape. And the local media isn't pushing back. They're nodding along, writing down the quotes, and publishing the company line without a single follow-up question. Now listen to the explanation about the injury timeline itself. The team said they tried rehab first to see if they could minimize symptoms. Translation: this injury had been going on for weeks, possibly longer than anyone's admitting. They knew about it. They rehabbed it quietly. And only when rehab failed did they move to surgery. All of this happened while Dantis hadn't played since July 17th. That's not a minor detail. That's 2 full weeks of games where she was simply listed as unavailable, with zero explanation to fans or media. Now compare that to how the NBA handles injury reporting. Every NBA team is legally required to publish injury reports before every game. Probable, questionable, doubtful, out, specific body part, and an estimated return timeline. The WNBA has no such requirement. And teams like the Fever are exploiting that gap. They can hide injuries, keep fans in the dark, and only reveal information once they're forced to, because a player just had surgery and there's no more hiding it. And here's where the front office's incompetence becomes impossible to defend. The trade deadline was just 3 days before this announcement. 3 days. The Fever knew Dantis was dealing with a meniscus issue that might require surgery. They knew she was in rehab. They knew there was a real chance she'd miss extended time or the rest of the season entirely. So what did they do at the deadline? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No move for a backup big. No push for front-court depth. Not even a real exploration of their options. What? Because admitting they needed help would mean admitting they made a mistake letting Henderson walk. It would mean admitting their read on Dantis was wrong. So instead, they did nothing and hoped the problem would quietly resolve itself. That's not a strategy. That's negligence. And now Aaliyah Boston has no legitimate backup for the rest of the season, because the front office was too proud to admit their own error. Let's get into how fans reacted because it's brutal. The comment section under the Fever's own announcement says everything you need to know about how this is landing. The most liked comment isn't well wishes for Dantis. It isn't confidence in the roster. It's pure frustration. It would be nice if the Fever still had Dani Henderson. Another top comment. They knew this happened at least 2 weeks ago and refused to report it to avoid backlash. The trade deadline happened 3 days ago and the Fever made no attempt to get a verified backup for Boston. Fans aren't stupid. They can see the timeline. They can connect the dots. The organization tried to sit on this injury to avoid criticism over the Henderson decision. And in doing so, they walked right past a massive roster hole before the deadline passed. And then there's this one, free Scott Agnes. We didn't realize how good we had it. That's a reference to the former beat reporter who actually broke Real news instead of carrying water for the organization. Agnes was the one who revealed Caitlin Clark's ankle injury last season, when the team tried to bury it. He reported the truth instead of waiting around for an official press release. And what happened to him? The Fever effectively froze him out, limited access, harder to do his job, and now he's gone. The reporters who remain have clearly learned the lesson. Don't ask hard questions, don't dig for information, just publish what you're handed. Now here's where this gets genuinely concerning. Look at the pattern of injuries happening in practice under Stephanie White's system. Multiple players who've trained under her have said practices are harder than actual games. And not just during training camp to build conditioning, but in the middle of the regular season. Practices that reportedly leave players more exhausted than the games themselves. Last season, Caitlin Clark suffered a quad injury that came out of nowhere, in practice. Lexi Hull was unavailable to start preseason with an undisclosed injury. Dani Henderson had a mysterious absence that was never fully explained. And now Damiris Dantis has a torn meniscus that didn't happen in a game. So when did it happen? The obvious answer is practice. But the Fever won't say that publicly, because it would raise uncomfortable questions about training intensity, practice methods, and whether White's coaching approach is sustainable for a professional roster over a full season. This isn't normal. Other WNBA franchises don't have this recurring pattern of mysterious, unreported practice injuries stacking up over multiple seasons. This is specific to the Fever's organizational culture under the current regime, a culture that consistently prioritizes secrecy over transparency, loyalty over competence, and image management over honest communication with the fans who show up every single night. Here's why this matters far beyond one torn meniscus. This is about organizational accountability across the entire WNBA, and how the league's lack of mandatory transparency lets teams operate in ways that would never survive in a major men's sports league. Let's walk back through the full timeline. Dantis last played on July 17th. That's confirmed. She then missed every game after that, simply listed as unavailable, with no injury designation for 2 straight weeks. No explanation to fans. No return timeline. No injury specifics. Just silence. And during those 2 weeks, the beat reporters who cover this team every single day also said nothing. No questions raised in press conferences. No investigative reporting asking where a rotation player had disappeared to. They accepted the silence and moved on. You might assume that's because the reporters genuinely didn't know. But that's not how beat reporting actually works. These journalists are at every practice, every shoot-around, every team event. They see exactly who's participating in drills and who's off to the side doing rehab work. They have relationships with staff, with players, with people inside the building. The idea that every single Fever beat reporter was completely unaware of a season-ending knee injury is simply not believable. They knew something was wrong. They chose not to report it. What? Because the team asked them not to. In today's WNBA media landscape, especially around a franchise built around Caitlin Clark, access is everything. A beat reporter who breaks a story the team didn't want broken risks losing that access entirely. Frozen out of press conferences. Bumped off team flights. Cut out of exclusive interviews. For reporters whose careers depend on covering this one team, that's a risk most of them simply won't take. Compare that, again, to the NBA, where every team is required by league rule to submit a full injury report before every single game. Body part, status, timeline, no exceptions. There's no legal option to sit on a torn meniscus for 2 weeks while quietly rehabbing it in private. Transparency is mandatory, and teams that violate injury reporting rules face real fines. The WNBA has none of that. Teams can be as vague and secretive as they want, and organizations like the Fever are taking full advantage of that gap, hiding injuries to control the narrative, avoid criticism, and stop fans from asking uncomfortable questions about roster construction. Think about what the Fever was really trying to avoid. If they'd announced 2 weeks earlier that Dantis had a torn meniscus and would miss significant time, the immediate reaction from every fan, every reporter, every talk show would have been the same. Why did we let Dani Henderson walk? That question would have dominated every single conversation about this team. And the front office would have had to defend in real time, a decision that only looks worse with each passing week. Dani Henderson was a young, athletic guard who could defend multiple positions, push pace in transition, and bring energy off the bench. She had real chemistry with Clark from the season before. She was on a team-friendly contract, and the Fever let her walk in free agency without even making a serious offer to keep her. What? Because they chose to keep Damiris Dantis instead. A veteran valued for locker room presence and culture over a younger player who could actually produce on the floor. And to be fair, that decision might have been defensible if Dantis were healthy and playing well. There's a real argument to be made for veteran leadership on a young team pushing for the playoffs. But Dantis wasn't playing well even before the injury. Shooting numbers down. Defensive mobility limited. DNPs in meaningful games. The locker room argument was the only justification left standing, and even that was shaky at best. So when Dantis went down with a season-ending injury, the front office panicked. They knew exactly how bad this would look. They knew fans would immediately question the Henderson decision. So they tried to keep it quiet. They rehabbed her privately, hoping she could avoid surgery entirely and get back before anyone noticed she was gone. And they told the beat reporters to stay silent. But that's not how injuries work. A torn meniscus doesn't heal with a few days of rest. The rehab failed and surgery became unavoidable. Only then did the Fever have no choice but to announce it, and even then they controlled every detail. Carefully scripted quotes about floor spacing and locker room presence. No follow-up questions allowed about when the injury actually happened or why it went unreported for 2 weeks. And the trade deadline timing makes all of this even more damning. The deadline landed on August 4th. Dantis had already been out since July 17th. More than 2 weeks where the front office knew they had a real frontcourt problem, and chose to do absolutely nothing about it. No backup center acquired. No trade for a stretch 4. Not even a free agent signing. They simply hoped the problem would disappear on its own. Maybe there weren't great trade options available. Maybe asking prices were too high. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We don't even know if the Fever tried. There's been zero reporting of trade discussions involving frontcourt players. No rumors. No indication they explored anything at all. Because pursuing a trade would mean publicly admitting they needed help, and admitting they needed help would mean admitting the Henderson decision was a mistake. This is organizational pride overriding basic basketball logic. The front office would rather enter the stretch run of the season understaffed than admit a roster construction error. They'd rather risk running Aaliyah Boston into the ground with no real backup than face a wave of fair criticism. And this is not the first time the Fever have done this. Last season, Caitlin Clark played through a high ankle sprain for weeks before anyone outside the organization knew. She was visibly limited, struggling with lateral movement, not attacking the rim with her usual burst. Fans could see something was wrong. The team said nothing. It wasn't until a former beat reporter mentioned it publicly that the truth came out. Clark had been playing through a significant ankle injury the entire time, and the organization had sat on it. What? Same reason as the Dantis situation. Admitting Clark was injured would invite hard questions. Should she even be playing? Is the team risking her long-term health for short-term wins? Are the medical decisions being made appropriately? The Fever didn't want to answer any of that, so they simply didn't say anything. And what happened to the reporter who broke that story? He's no longer covering this team in that role. Nobody is claiming he was directly forced out, but the message to every other reporter in that press box was unmistakable. Break a story this organization doesn't want broken, and there will be consequences for your access and your career. The coverage since then reflects exactly that lesson. Solid reporters, in fairness, but nothing adversarial, nothing that challenges the official narrative. Features on player development. Game recaps. Coach quotes from press conferences. Standard, safe beat reporting. And fans have absolutely noticed. Fever social media is full of frustration about the lack of real journalism. Where are the hard questions? Why is nobody asking about the Henderson decision directly? How did an entire beat miss a season-ending injury for 2 weeks straight? People can tell when the reporters covering a team have gotten too comfortable to hold that team accountable. And that's a problem that goes far beyond one franchise. If beat reporters across the league are scared to ask tough questions or break uncomfortable stories because they'll lose their access, then fans stop getting real information about their own teams. They get PR spin dressed up as journalism. They get carefully managed talking points instead of the truth. And that slowly erodes trust in both the media covering the league and the organizations themselves. The fix here is simple and honestly overdue. The WNBA needs mandatory injury reporting, the same way the NBA has had for years. Every team disclosing injuries within 24 hours of diagnosis. Specific body part. Expected timeline. Regular updates. No more sitting on a torn meniscus for 2 weeks. No more secret ankle sprains discovered a season later. Just basic transparency and basic accountability. But until the league actually implements rules like that, franchises like the Fever will keep operating exactly like this, in the shadows. They'll keep making questionable roster decisions, hiding the fallout when it comes, controlling the media narrative through access management, and fans will keep being the last ones to find out the truth. And honestly, that's exactly why channels like this one exist. Because you deserve better than press releases dressed up as journalism. You deserve someone willing to actually ask the question nobody else in that press box is brave enough to ask. If this video helped you see what's really going on behind the curtain at Indiana, if you're tired of getting spoon-fed the company line instead of the truth, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It genuinely means more than you know. This channel only grows because people like you decide the Real story is worth sticking around for. So subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's keep holding this league accountable together. I'm not going anywhere, and neither should you. This has been WNBA Analysis. I'll see you in the next one.